With most of the work done now, we're at the stage of testing the little cyclemaster. Started off rather well, started up, rode it up and down the hill, seemed to be going fine. Did just a few little runs to check things over. Got to the point where we turned it off, checked tightness of nuts and bolts and silly stuff like that, and we could not get it started again. Pedalled it, bumped it, you name it, nothing. Just couldn't get the little sod running. So something had changed. Still, we'll watch it for a couple of more moments just to see how nice it was going up and down the road. I think this is what they mean by pedal assist. Anyway, got it back into the workshop, put it on its stand, and as you can see, no matter how fast we pedalled it, couldn't get the thing running. We did all the usual tests, spark, carburation, everything seemed fine. So, started taking bits off it. Although the spark seemed perfect, we swapped out the magneto for a spare one. No difference at all. Even swapped the carburetor for one off of a strimmer. Made up a little extension pipe. The carburetor came off a Honda powered strimmer, 32cc, and it did fire up. When it was running, it ran quite well. As soon as we turned it off, it wouldn't start again. So, a search on the internet through the forums and a quick chat with Danny at Moped Land. Everyone kept telling me that the condenser was the problem, that it's a common fault with these things, they warm up and cease to function. And everybody advised me to put on an external condenser. So I did. I cut the wire to the original condenser and extended it. I then bolted a condenser into the casing and connected the wire to the condenser. The condenser came from an early Honda 50, so I presumed it would be suitable. Sadly, this had no result at all. I thought the spark originally was quite good, and this one seemed no different. So, turned off the camera and took the engine out of the bike. The only thing I hadn't changed, because it's inside the engine, is the rotary disc for the inlet timing. And in desperation I decided to have a look. So took the crankcase half off the engine, which involved removing the barrel and the cylinder head, and found that the corrosion I'd removed originally was back. So I had to take off the disc and replace it with a new one. For this I needed a little puller, a special puller. I didn't want to damage the bearing, which was brand new, so I ended up making a little puller. It's a bit of 40mm box section with a window cut in it. As you can see, I'm doing that here at the vise. A top plate is put on with a screw thread for a bolt, and then a bottom plate thin enough to squeeze between the rotary disc and the bearing when the disc is pushed back onto the flywheel, with a slot in it to go round the crank pin and then pull the bearing off. This was gently tapped into place, and with one screwdriver locking it in place, the spanner pulled the bearing up and off its spigot. With the bearing off, I could then properly inspect the little timing disc. Here's a picture of the timing disc after I had sanded it flat and polished out most of the corrosion. It seemed fine to me at the time, but now we had wear marks where it was touching the, or polish marks where it was touching the crankcase, which is nice, but you can see here there's a section where it hasn't touched the crankcase at all, and on closer inspection the corrosion, I nicked it here with a grinding wheel to see how deep it went. It looks as if there's voids under the skin and the surface has sunk down into these voids. So you lose the seal on the crankcase, it doesn't breathe properly, and the little bike won't start. So lucky enough, I got one on the internet, put it back into place, timed it up and replaced the bearing, and then it was a simple case of well, with the crankcase I just cleaned the gasket using carburetor cleaner, resealed it with silicone sealer, as you can see here, a fine wipe, not too much, don't want it going everywhere, then gently tapped it into place and screwed it home. With the base gasket I wasn't quite as lucky. Trying to clean it, I tore it. So, made a new one. Very handy to keep a stock of gasket paper for just such an emergency. This just left refitting the head, the barrel and the head, making careful note of where the pegs are on the piston to align the piston rings. And with the head there's no gasket, so getting it perfectly clean and then a finest smear of gasket cement before you put it on. Tightening the 3 screws down evenly to a nice even torque. With the wheel assembled and back into the frame, I started to connect everything up, clutch cable, throttle cable, and put petrol in it, connect the brakes up and that sort of thing. As I put the petrol in, I noticed that the tap was dripping. I'll have to sort this out later. Just want to get it running. If I can get it running, I'll be happy. The axle stand under the bottom bracket was replaced with this more robust stand that I made for these little bikes. It screws onto the axle and supports the back of the bike up in the air, so you can pedal it like mad without it shaking itself to pieces or touching the bench and trying to drive itself off. So here we go. Few pops there, keep going. Another prime and we'll give it one more go. Or two. Considering all the fiddling I did before I decided to take the engine apart, I can't guarantee any of the settings are correct. I'll have to check the points, adjust the carburetor a bit better, although I'm getting close to it there, and just go over the whole thing and make sure I've got everything just about right. Still, it's running, that's the important thing. What I'll do now is I'll run it for a bit, make sure it doesn't conk out or anything, then I'll turn it off and come back tomorrow. That will be the big test. And just before I call it a day, I shall take the petrol tank off and sort out the petrol pipe so I don't come back to a big puddle of petrol all over the floor tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.